So Resident Evil 9 had its launch this week. Was it successful? You could say that. Hello, my gaming brothers and sisters, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm Jonathan, your host here at QuickBird Gaming, and I appreciate you tuning in for another episode of QuickBird News, where we cover all the news that's fit to cover for the last week. This episode is going to cover the news from the 22nd to the 28th of February, and this has just been an incredibly busy news week. There's so much going on. Got a lot of stories to talk about, so I'm going to try and hit them pretty quickly and not go drag this out too long. We got a whole ton of Sony news, a whole bunch of stuff happening with Sony and PlayStation. I've got several things to talk about there. We got some disturbing news, some potential news about the Xbox situation that I covered last week with Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond being kicked out and the new CEO coming from Microsoft's AI division. We got some interesting take on that. We also have Valve being sued again for another stupid reason, and a few other things to talk about. As always, each story in this video is timestamped in the description box down below, so feel free to scroll down and jump to a story that interests you. Okay, having said all that, before we get to all those stories, we got to talk about the biggest and best story of the week, and that is the launch of Resident Evil Requiem. Okay, we're going to kick it off with this IGN article that was published on Friday the 27th of February. Resident Evil Requiem launches big on Steam, breaks series record. And you can see they say that as of the time of this writing, 230,000 people are playing Capcom's latest chapter of the survival horror, the series. Though currently after launch it hit 267,000. That was just as of this writing. It has since gotten even higher. They said this marks Resident Evil's best numbers ever on Steam, up from 168,000 peak for RE4 Remake in March of 23 and 106,000 for the Biohazard in 2021. And then the article says it also paints a pretty positive picture for the game's sales performance overall. And I think that is a key point because this game is just blowing up everywhere. And by every measure imaginable, it's doing very well. And when I come over to, this is the Steam database page, then I will go ahead and refresh it now. And you can see that this is, as of this video being made, it's about 7 o'clock on Mountain Time, Saturday night, Saturday the 20th of February. So the day after release, and you can see right now there's still 256,000 players in the game. It hit a peak of almost 350,000 earlier today. It is just going wild. Twitch stats, you see thousands and thousands of people are watching this. #1 in top sellers on Steam. It's going very, very well. Not just Steam. This is on the PlayStation Store. You can see, I'll refresh that too, 19,000 ratings and at a 4.92 out of 5 stars. So it's doing incredibly well. I mean, if you were to translate that to Steam, that's like a 98% approval rate. Roughly. It is doing very well there as well. And over on Steam, you can see overwhelmingly positive. This is just among English speakers. 10,000 reviews, 95% positive. Overall, when you kick to the bottom, all languages, it's 94% positive of 21,000 reviews. So doing very well. And look, the first negative I see, it's a performance base. Everybody else is going full up positive. It is just doing very well. Now, I do not have any sales numbers for this game yet. It's a little early. The game did just release wide yesterday, so Capcom hasn't put out any sales numbers. However, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I bet by the time they come around for the first weekend, they've sold. I'm going to be bold and say I bet they've sold 3 million copies already this weekend. The game is just doing that well, and it's certainly become a mega hit for them, better than anybody, I think, expected. I think people expected this game to do well, but this is even better than expected. And unlike, a year ago, Capcom had a pretty big hit, at least in terms of sales with Monster Hunter Wilds, but the PC optimization problems, really held it back to the point where even to this day, it's still having problems. And it was driving down its rating and driving down its satisfaction. Appears to be very little of that. I mean, we're always going to have some people that have performance issues, but overall it appears to be doing very, very well. So this is a net positive. This is a positive for people who want good games. People seem to be very satisfied with it so far, just it collectively. people who want, it's not having tons of performance issues, at least as far as we can discern. It's a series that's well loved, and people are enjoying this as part of that series experience. And it's a bonus for, I saw somebody else make the point somewhere in a discussion forum earlier today that Sony was saying 10, 14 years ago that the single play experience is going to be dead soon. Well, this is just another knife wound in that theory, because the single play experiences, I feel right now, are really, if not carrying this industry financially, they're carrying it spiritually. So I love to see this, even though I would call myself a Resident Evil casual. I'm not a hardcore fan. I enjoy the games, but I don't know all the lore, and I don't replay them over and over and speedrun them and so on. But I love to see this. I love to see this game's success, and I'm really glad that people are enjoying it. Okay, now we go from a game that is doing quite well to one whose future is in doubt. And I am talking about Marathon from Bungie, which is in the middle of its Server Slam test right now. I think it started on Thursday on the 26th of February. And it's had a pretty mixed reception. I'm going to start with this Games Radar article from Friday the 27th. The first ever font slop game. Marathon players are already sick of looking at the upcoming Bungie shooter's eyesore UI. This is just one common complaint that came up. Okay, they said the Marathon Server Slam seems to be going well. Press X to doubt, especially when some players look away from the game's user interface long enough to stop puking. Bungie's maximalist UI is causing some headaches. Marathon got to be the first ever font slop game, YouTuber Kelsky writes. On Twitter, there's like 20 different combination of fonts, boldness, levels, sizes, spacing, all caps versus regular caps, all on one menu page. And I have seen this. This seems to be a common complaint about the game, is that the UI and just the interface in general is a little wonky. And it's had some other controversy too at the same time. This was kind of a nothing issue, but it did create some stir. This is a Dual Shockers article from February the 27th. Marathon is censoring players talking about its competition. In case you didn't know, okay, the extraction shooter kicks off its network test today, However, Marathon has an uphill climb, as late last year, one extraction shooter managed to grab everybody's attention. That's Arc Raiders. Bungie is so much aware of the competition that players can't even talk about it in game. On Twitter, content creator Rooster captured footage of the word Arc Raiders getting censored in Marathon's in-game chat. And here is the tweet. Let me just play the video real quick. You can see, okay, Fortnite, no issue. Escape from Tarkov, no issue. Arc Raiders. Huh, that's censored. Arc Raiders again, censored. Arc Raiders one word, censored. So, question mark. Oh, but the question mark went through. Anyway, so that this was something that Bungie acknowledged. They did patch it out. People said it was probably left over from a previous build, and it was an unintended error. My question would be, why did you have it out in the first place? If that's the case, it was left over from previous build. I don't know the answer, but, this is just one more issue they didn't need. Now I'm going to go to the Steam database page here, and this is showing where we are now. I'll go ahead and refresh this so we get a most current count. This is as of about 7 o'clock on the 28th of February, Saturday night, Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Mountain Time. And you can see they've got about 67,000 players in game right now. We've had a slight uptick. It was down to 64,000 earlier. It was down at 36,000, 37,000 this morning. But it has ticked up back up, and they are hanging there. They had 85 as a peak. Now, the interesting thing about this is their overall peak was 143. And it's kind of dropped in half in, about 2 days. This game, from everything I can determine, Marathon has been in development active development for at least 4 years, from what I can tell, with several hundred developers working on it. Between marketing and other things, I feel confident in saying this game has probably crossed into 9-figure development cost territory, $100 million or more, meaning that at $40 a pop, after you start taking out things like storefront costs and publishing costs and so on, you are probably talking close to 3 million copies needed to break even. And I don't know if it's going to get that. I said in a post on my channel around a week ago that I thought this game's chances were about 50-50 of being a success. I think if you had asked me a year ago, with all the controversy they had with the bad alpha test and the art controversy, it would have been more on the order of about 20% chance. It seems to have recovered some, and there are still quite a few people playing it. Bear in mind, this is just the Steam numbers. I don't know if the server slam is happening on the consoles. So I don't know that for sure, but I'm just going to assume it is. I don't want to go take the time to go look it up on video. I'm going to assume it is. So they still have, maybe 150-ish thousand players playing, maybe 200,000. The problem is they needed about 2 to 3 times that number playing the server slam right now, because if they have to sell 2 to 3 million copies, you figure 67,000 players probably means there's 500,000 to 600,000 players actively playing it, because this is just who's on right now. People come and go through the course of the day around the world. That means that they've got that many. Not all of those players are going to buy a copy. So I'm going to stick with my prediction that basically it's a crapshoot whether this game is successful or not. But I pretty much guarantee the people at Bungie and Sony are both holding their breath. Okay, I said I had a lot of Sony news to talk about, and we're going to start with this article from Insider Gaming from Thursday the 26th. Sony could be backing away from releasing single-player titles on PC. New details reveal that Sony PlayStation might stop releasing its single-player titles on PC. Now, obviously, we're not talking about its live service games, because they need to go to as broad of an audience as possible. So things like Helldivers and Marathon would continue to go cross-platform, but they're talking about their single-player, first-party exclusives and keeping them exclusive. All right, Jason Schreier, who is a games journalist primarily working for Bloomberg, discussed PlayStation seemingly considering stopping its single-player games from coming to PC. Schreier stated that he thinks the strategy for them, live service, yes, to PC, while he's getting the sense they are backing away from putting their exclusive console stuff like traditional single-player stuff on PC. He mentioned it wouldn't be surprising if Marvel's Wolverine never comes to PC. He also expressed uncertainty about how successful the PC releases have been. Now, I don't know how he could be that uncertain about it. I've read, looking into it, I've read that Horizon Zero Dawn, which was originally a PlayStation exclusive, sold somewhere in the vicinity of 4.5 million copies on Steam, which would account for about 15 to 20% of its total sales. So getting rid of that seems like an unlikely move. Now, I think what Sony is angling here for is they want to try and sell more consoles. They want to have enough games that people will buy the console in order to come over for these games. And I just don't think that's going to happen. First of all, people are getting poorer. It's hard out here. And with the cost of everything going up, like RAM, like GPUs, that's going to mean both the cost of building a PC and buying a console are both going to start going up. And I know some people have both, but I think that number is going to slowly start dwindling as their costs hike. And people are kind of have to choose one or the other. Now, people that already play a lot on Sony, on PlayStation, may continue to do that. But I don't think you're going to draw a whole lot of PC players away from, if they have to make a choice one way or the other, you're not going to draw a lot of them over. First of all, people that have been playing on PC, if they've been playing for very long, they probably already have very well populated game databases on Steam or Epic or from Good Old Games, and they're not going to throw that all away. If they say, look, I got to replace my PC or switch over to console, they're not going to toss that away to go to a console. The second half of this is just how many first-party exclusive games is Sony even releasing? How many have they put out in the last couple years? I mean, yeah, they put out some sports shows like, Major League Baseball. I think Gran Turismo is only on PlayStation. But beyond that, yes, they had Ghost of Yotai. They had Astrobot. That's in the last couple years. What else? I mean, I think Lego Horizon Adventures might have started off only on PC. Nobody's going to switch for that. Intergalactic. I know Naughty Dog is a first party, but I guarantee you nobody's going to buy a console just to play that. I don't think Death Stranding 2 is a first party exclusive. I don't think Kojima Productions is technically owned by Sony. So that's not an issue. I mean, I think then you have to go all the way back to about 2023 to Spider-Man 2 for the last, after Astrobot and Ghost of Yotai. They're not putting out a ton of games. So I don't think it's going to be incentive to draw people away. And I think all they're going to do is they're going to end up, cutting off their nose to spite their face here. But then again, we're watching Sony make a lot of boneheaded decisions. So this shouldn't surprise anyone. Now, before we start talking about some of Sony's bad strategies, because Marvel's Wolverine was mentioned in that article, I just wanted to highlight this Eurogamer article that was published back on Tuesday the 24th. PS5 exclusive, Marvel's Wolverine claws its way to early autumn release date. They're releasing it on 15 September 2026, which is, okay, I think that'll be all right. That's about 2 months before Grand Theft Auto is supposed to release. And so I think it's probably still in a good window to get maximum exposure and playtime. We'll see how it does. If it doesn't come to PC, that is what it is. I won't ever be able to play it. But I've got a backlog that'll last forever, and I think that's how a lot of people feel. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that it does, in fact, have a release date. Now, I'm not going to fault Sony directly for this one, but it is news about that studio and about the PlayStation. So here it is, PC Gamer. This was published on the 27th on Friday. Sony was ready to approve a Bloodborne remake, but Fromsoftware turned it down. And the lead says it might be time to accept the Bloodborne remake isn't happening at least anytime soon. But according to Bloomberg, the project almost happened, but Fromsoftware are the ones that ultimately turned it down. So it has been demanded by fans for so long that Sony's remaster studio Bluepoint figured it was inevitable it would be given the job after its very successful Demon's Souls remake in 2020. Instead, Sony had them working on a live service. Then after they canceled it, Bluepoint was left to search for other projects. It approached Sony again to pitch its idea for Bloodborne, and Sony was receptive. The only reason it didn't happen, according to the report, was because FromSoftware didn't want it to happen. So, like I said, I'm not going to blame Sony for that one directly. Though, as a tangent to this whole thread, I wonder if FromSoftware was kind of reading the handwriting on the wall and seeing the chaos that's going on at Sony, and they did not want their IP getting tangled up in that. I have no idea if that's true or not, but it sure could be. Now, this one is absolutely on Sony. This article from Game Rant from Wednesday the 25th, another PlayStation live service game reportedly in trouble. I mentioned this last week. I mentioned it in that same post on my channel's post tabs about Sony's live service projects. PlayStation subsidiary Haven Studios has reportedly begun letting contractor agreements lapse as work continues on its first title, the multiplayer heist shooter Fairgame. With the project said to be nowhere near completion, this turn of events signals that yet another PlayStation live service game could be in trouble. Haven is a PlayStation-owned studio. Okay, the Canadian company was acquired by Sony in 2022, just 1 year after its establishment. And they go through all of this. Okay, this coming from somebody at the studio. Multiple contractors, according to one that reached out to me and I verified them through LinkedIn, are not having their contracts extended. They're finishing out their contracts in some cases. So, in other words, the sources characterize the situation as unusual because Fairgame is said to be nowhere near completion. So you got a game that's nowhere near completion. You got a studio that has no games under its belt. Yes, I know some of the founders worked on the early Assassin's Creed games and so on. As Haven Studios, they haven't put out a game in 4 years. They've been working on Fairgame, and it's another live service from Sony that could be in trouble. If they've been working on this game for 4 years, the game's nowhere near ready. It's not probably going to come out this year. It could be next year. Now we're talking about 5 to 6 years in development. Another game, another one that has to sell millions of copies just to break even. And, yeah, okay, I don't even want to read the rest of this. It's depressing. But another live service, they're letting contracts expire. Why? Because they don't have the cash flow for them. Another live service at Sony in trouble. Maybe you ought to think about putting those games on PC after all. Okay, that's enough Sony and PlayStation news. I want to turn to what in a ideal world would be PlayStation's prime competition being the Xbox, although we know that Xbox as a console has been dead for a long time. But this Video Games Chronicle article from Monday the 23rd says it might be getting even deader. Xbox co-founder believes it is being sunsetted in favor of AI, calls new CEO a palliative care doctor. Xbox co-founder Seamus Blackley believes that Microsoft gaming brand is being sunsetted and that its new CEO has been brought in to slide Xbox gently into the night. And he left Microsoft in 2002 after launching the original Xbox, said he believes her appointment over those with a background in video game indicates that Microsoft's gaming future will be dominated by generative AI. Now, this is a very deep topic and one that I really can't even cover fully in this video. But and this interview by Blackley, yes, got a lot of attention early in the week. But you're just looking at one person's opinion. We don't know if this is true or not. I said last week, after all the Xbox news broke, I am skeptical of Asha Sharma's appointment as the Xbox CEO, as somebody with a background in AI. Somebody in the comments to this article pointed out that she's been brought in to revive flagging brands before. I don't know if that's what's going to happen here. I don't know if Blackley's right or wrong. The only thing we will know is that time will tell. My big concern in this case, though, is aside for some empathy for the people that are going to lose their jobs as this process gets shut down, my concern as a gamer is what's going to happen to these IPs that Xbox owns. And if you know me, I'm primarily thinking about ZeniMax and Bethesda and, the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout games and those types of things. Where are they going to go? I don't think they'll just disappear. I think they'll get bought up by somebody. Our future is getting more and more chaotic in this industry. We just got to kind of ride the waves up and down. This is an article that annoys me just because it's stupid. This comes from gamesindustry.biz from Thursday the 26th. New York sues Valve over loot boxes, alleging gambling law violations. New York Attorney General has filed lawsuits against Valve, alleging loot boxes in Counter-Strike 2, Team Fortress 2, and Dota 2 unlawfully encourage minors to gamble, claiming Valve has made billions of dollars, luring its users, many of whom are teenagers or younger, to engage in gambling. The lawsuit seeks to stop them from promoting blah, 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 blah. It's all bullshit. And I'll tell you why it's bullshit. If this was some wider push by New York to completely outlaw gambling, I would understand it better. But this appears to be a very targeted attack. And you know what else encourages kids to gamble? FanDuel, which has close ties to the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball and advertises on all kinds of social media. You don't think teenagers watch sports? You don't think teenagers use social media? And before you give me they have to have a credit card to use it. You have to have a credit card to buy shit on Steam too. If they have their parents' credit card for one, they'll have it for the other. It's really a wash in that sense. There's also toys, like things like Labubu and some of these other toys that have, mystery boxes. Our entire culture is bending people to gamble. In the last 10 years, it's become very prevalent. This is hardly a Valve-specific issue. And see, I'm not going to defend loot boxes because I'm not a big fan of them. However, this appears to be, like I said, very targeted and very specific. Why they're going after Valve? Like I said, FanDuel is owned by Flutter something corporation. FanDuel is a slight subsidiary, but their parent company is worth something like 1.5 to 2 times what the Valve Corporation is worth on paper. Why didn't they go after them? I'm sure you can draw your own conclusions, but this kind of stuff really annoys me. It's kind of like they're looking for an easy target and payout. They being the government. Our government is constantly doing nothing but finding problems so they can peddle the solution. And it's just ridiculous. You know what? Since we're on the subject of things that are pissing me off, I might as well just roll into this PC Games In article that was published on Wednesday the 25th. Discord delays its age verification, admits it knew the rollout was, quote, going to be controversial and that it, quote, failed at its most basic job. After mounting pressure and a potential user exodus, Discord's CTO has delayed the chat's age verification plans to later in the year. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. They still want that precious, precious, sweet data that they can sell off. It's still going to happen. Remember, notice they're very clear. They're delaying it till the second half of the year. They're not canceling it. So if you are investing in or looking for alternatives, don't stop now. Keep doing it and plan to leave the platform, because this is what they're going to do. Now, I'll caveat this by saying that we don't know what's going to happen. If this is going to be a YouTube-ish age verification where a bulk of accounts are never touched because they pretty much assume that you're an adult based on your history. But we don't know if that's going to be the case. And the fact that they wanted to work with some pretty sketchy third-party outlets, which they have since ditched, but who knows who else, who knows who's taken that that agency's place. I just don't think they've been very upfront about this process, and it's not very trustworthy. So you shouldn't trust them. Next, I have this Game Informer article from Wednesday, the 25th of February. Greedfall 2 publisher Nacon files for insolvency weeks before the RPG's sequel's launch. Nacon, the publisher behind the upcoming Greedfall, Dying World, and other games like Hell Is Us and Robocop Rogue City, has filed for insolvency. In other words, that means it's unable to pay its debts, and its IPs may have to be sold off. As like I said, like the article said, it affects the Greedfall, Hell Is Us, Rogue City, Styx, all relatively small games, but some of whom have a loyal following, and obviously it represents a number of employees that are now facing potential dissolution of their jobs, and we don't know where these IPs are going to land. So I mentioned in a couple of segments back, we have to ride this wave through the industry, especially as consumers. Well, the developers and the game companies have to ride it too, and unfortunately, some of them are going to capsize, and I think that's what we're seeing here. So just bear in mind, if you enjoy these franchises, you might want to run out and pick them up, because who knows what's going to happen. Well, I'll close with this one, because why not? Because Highguard just can't keep itself out of the news, no matter how much I try. I usually like to close with a good news story, but there just weren't enough of them this week. I opened with my best story. So anyway, this is from Thursday the 26th, this article from Insider Gaming. Tencent pulled funding after Highguard's rough launch. New details have emerged regarding Highguard's downfall. A new report notes that Tencent pulled its funding for the game, leading to the mass layoffs at Wildlight Entertainment. While not confirmed, it is believed that financing was contingent upon the game hitting certain metrics, such as a strong retention rate. Well, they botched that, didn't they? And, we have this Games Rant article from the same day, from Thursday the 26th. Highguard has reached a brutal new low, that it fell as low as 253 concurrent players on the platform. It's worse than that. As of Friday, the game actually bottomed out at 201 players. 201 players is about 0.2% of what they had at peak. Now they're sitting at 483 on a Saturday night and the weekend. They got a little over 500 today, but that's all they could manage. It's over. It's over. The game's finished. Wildlight's finished. There's no coming back from this. I went out here, looked at, let's see, where this is, I think right here is where they brought in the 5v5 to try and resuscitate it. It went from 5,600 to 8,500 players, and then in 2 days was lower than where it had started before they tried that. They've said, they've had people saying they have tons of content that'll never be seen. They're down to something like 20 people working on this. It's over. I don't know when these companies are going to learn their lesson and stop chasing this live service dragon. Like that Stan screams, "You never catch the dragon, Dad." If you know, you know. But anyway, I think this is pretty much a done deal, and Highguard is kaput. Well, that kind of went downhill, didn't it? Started off great, but the rest of the week was kind of a mixed bag of disappointment and irritation. That's just the way it goes sometimes. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate that. It takes one click and it helps me out a whole lot. Also, leave a like on the video. And if you think I missed a major news story, or there is something that I said that you disagree with, if you think Sony's on the right track by going exclusive, or still think Highguard can pull it out, let me know in the comments down below. I don't mind being disagreed with. I just love the banter around games. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time QuickBird Gaming puts out a new video. Alrighty, I will be back next week with more QuickBird news. And as always, I'm still working on some other projects. So I hope you'll tune in. Hope to see you then. If not, I will see you next week. Until then, you people go out there, you live your best lives, and y'all stay gaming.